Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Ressa. Welcome to Rappler's coverage of the vice presidential debate carried for you by CNN Philippines. Joining us today on the Rappler panel, on my right, you see Ateneo professor. He's the head of the Development Studies program of Ateneo, Jail Cornelio. He's also with the Philippine Sociological Society. So we're looking at him for a sociological perspective of what's happening. What does this show about us? Across from him, you see her as a familiar face. We love hearing her perspectives of media and society. You see University of the Philippines, the College of Mass Communications professor, Clarissa David. Next to me, a familiar face.
Old face.
She says old, but old and always young. Rappler's editor-at-large, Marites Vitug. We're coming to you live from the Rappler offices, and you'll see behind me, everyone is hard at work in terms of putting this coverage together. When the debate begins, you can see on the same stream the broadcast of CNN Philippines, and in between, on the breaks, you'll hear from us as well as our reporters and editors here in Rappler. Let's start. Tell me, what are you looking for, Jail, in this vice presidential debate?
My expectations are a bit wide, to be honest, because I think that the vice presidential competition, I suppose, is a very wide game in the sense that they can talk whatever they want to, they can pursue whatever they want to, precisely because they don't shape the opinion insofar as the elections are concerned. Of course, because of my interest in inclusive development, in my interest in the peace process, and my interest in youth affairs, I would be looking for these things during the debates.
Okay. And Clarissa, in terms of what the vice presidential, the campaigns have been, what do you see are the themes coming out of this race?
Like some of the themes have been interesting because the moment somebody decided to run without a presidential tandem, it suddenly became interesting because you have to package him differently. You have to figure out how you're going to run the vice presidential race. But at the same time, historically in the Philippines, people don't put people in the presidential and vice presidential candidates in the same ticket together often.
Yes.
So historically, vice presidential campaigns have been run almost independent of presidential campaigns. The way that the Ang Matuwid has been doing it, where they're tandem, is really not the norm if you look from past elections. So the vice presidential race sort of operates separately. And it's been interesting because under the radar until very recently, people have been shifting their votes back and forth, and now it's a dead heat. It's a dead heat across two, depending on which poll you're looking at, 2 or 3 candidates.
So actually, now that you've said that, I want you to come with me and look at this poll that we have. I'm going to come on this side. Sorry, Marita. Take a look. These are actually the statistical surveys of the different groups. And if you look from time, the orange is Cheese Escudero, blue is Alejandro Cayetano, red is Marcos, Lenny Robredo is purple, Trillanes is brown, and green is Gringo Onasan. If you look at when you put all of the statistical surveys together, you actually see that Cheese Escudero and Bongbong Marcos are 0.1% apart. 24.8% for Cheese Escudero, 24.7% for Bongbong Marcos. And on that, I'm going to bring it to you, Marites. Is this a surprise? What's your reaction to having these two men be vying for the top spot?
Actually, I was surprised by Bongbong's meteoric rise in the surveys, considering that he carries a very infamous family name, the son of the late dictator. So it was really a shock and a surprise that he's leading the polls. So if we look at it, it's like people power happened 30 years ago. So we have an entire generation of voters who have not maybe read up and experienced martial law. So it's a challenge. I think this poses a challenge to academics, to us in the media, and our educators to, I think, really make our students learn more about the past, especially contemporary history.
Well, while you're at it, may I say something on
Sure,
that one?
please.
You know, I've been very interested in the voting patterns or behaviors of young people, and according to recent surveys, what we're actually seeing, Ma'am Marites, is that it's not the young people who are supporting Duterte and Bongbong Marcos. It's those who are 35 years old and above. Of course, according to a recent survey, it's about 20% who are supporting Bongbong Marcos, 18 to 34, around that, you know, that age group. And I belong to that age group, so the millennials. I'm an old millennial.
Borderline.
You know, but so while I agree that young people tend to be open to revisionist history, it's also interesting and worth asking why the generation that underwent the martial law and certainly the EDSA revolution are now supporting Bongbong Marcos and Duterte, for that matter.
Why do you think?
I have a very specific hypothesis about
Yeah.
that. When we change administrations during elections, at least in the literature in other countries shows that what wins a voter's allegiance is the candidate, is the issue of the day, right? So when
Right.
Aquino was running in 2010, the biggest problem of the country was corruption. It was so rampant, and he ran on the platform of corruption. So now the question is, if we accept an assumption that corruption has improved, it
Yeah.
is no longer the problem, the biggest, most important problem of the country. For many people, the biggest, most important problem is crime.
Crime.
True.
So if you think that crime and order and
True.
discipline is the problem, the biggest problem that's keeping the Philippines from progressing, if you look across the candidates, who is the candidate running on a platform of crime and order? That's Duterte and Marcos.
Interesting. Your reaction, Marites?
No, but I don't know if Bongbong has emphasized anti-crime and anti...
Well,
He's emphasized strong man.
strong man,
kind of,
yes,
but
and that
he will
during the
take
martial
action.
law years, everybody was disciplined.
That's right. That's close enough.
Yeah, just like
Yeah.
there's no trash in the streets, people follow the rules.
Yeah, the nostalgia for
Yes.
the glorious past that never existed.
So people want order. That's what this is telling us about Filipinos right now. They want a sense of an even playing field. Is that correct?
At the expense of... They're willing to risk having a strong man at the expense of human rights, or maybe killing a bit of our freedoms, taking away a bit of our freedoms.
I have another hypothesis, though. I mean, I submit to that, but my other hypothesis has to do with empathy. This administration, you know, we give them the credit, right, for everything that they have done, right?
Yes.
Economic growth and so on and so forth. But it's not known for empathy, especially the president, right? So you've got, so Duterte, in as much as he is the strongman from Davao, his message has changed in the past weeks, right? Now he's standing alongside children, for example. Even Laila de Lima, think about it, right? Laila de Lima, who used to be, you know, whose first commercial was with, you know, jailing all these criminals, is now saying, "I love you," right, to everyone. So unexpected of Laila de Lima, right? So, but nevertheless, what we're seeing is that there are clear attempts by the strongmen to express empathy. Why does that matter? In our research, I'm part of a big study called Vote of the Poor. It's a follow-up study on what the Institute of Philippine Culture did in 2004. And we collaborated with SWS to conduct a survey around the country about the qualities that the poor are looking for. And in fact, it's across the board. Concern for the poor, empathy is the most important quality. So yes, people are looking for discipline, but at the same time, they're looking for a mother. So in a way, it's a perfect family. Like a good father, but also a good mother. And the president or the vice president candidate who sends that message, the dual message, I think would win.
Does that apply to the vice presidential candidates? Because
That would be my question. Who,
Yeah, true.
I mean, in your
True.
work with the poor, who do they prefer as a vice president?
Gosh, well, the surveys already show, right? The pattern, I suppose. Well, what's your hypothesis, Clarissa?
Well, no,
Yeah.
my what we're looking at is there's actually a candidate who has a long history of working for the poor.
And this is
And this
the
is
third
Lenny
Robredo. Ah, okay,
Right,
yeah, sure.
right.
So
That's right.
how it has been a challenge for her to get her message
right.
across that she is
That's
for
right.
the poor, and in
Correct.
fact has spent her career in law helping the poor. And part of the reason why it's difficult is because she is running under the Daang Matuwid
Yeah,
platform,
sure.
which is
Sure.
a good thing in some respects, but creates a challenge because then she carries the baggage of, where is that empathy?
Yeah, but I think it's also because we're very personality based in our
Yeah.
politics. She's a new face, and she hasn't held any national position. So I think it's introducing herself to the public. This is like her coming out.
Sure.
So it takes time to really get to know her.
Again, it's interesting if you look at this, right? Her rise is pretty
That's right.
dramatic,
Very steep.
That's
right?
right.
That's her rise.
Just
That's
like
right.
Marcos.
Like Mark. Yeah, exactly.
right.
Parallels. In fact, a little steeper, but then on this one, you see Cheese Escudero.
That's
We
right.
haven't really talked about
Yes.
Cheese Escudero.
Yeah.
Tell us, what does he stand for? What do people expect from him? Why was he so high? Why this decline, for example?
Cheese Escudero started off in the race having most of the votes, the vast
That's right.
majority of
Yes,
votes.
he was the
They
best
were-
known
he was
of them, right?
best known. But he never really had a solid platform, that he wasn't running on particular issues that he would be strong in.
Sure.
And then so as Bongbong Marcos and Leni Escudero start roving the country, stealing away votes, they're stealing away votes from Cheese Escudero. Because in the beginning,
Correct.
those votes were not, those preferences were not set in stone. They are not rabid supporters. There are rabid supporters of Bongbong Marcos that are always going to be there. It doesn't matter if they hold the hand of any other candidate and look into their eyes and see empathy. They will still vote for Bongbong Marcos. So you have, all of the candidates have a strong base that are unchangeable. I think even though Cheese Escudero started off with most of the votes, his base is not that big.
Marites, your reaction to
I seem to see a disconnect between what the voters say are their urgent and important concerns, like the Pulse Asia survey shows jobs,
Sure. Sure.
Lower inflation rate. It's all mainly economic.
Income.
Yes. Yet they choose candidates. Well, everybody says this anyway, but to a certain degree. So I don't know if Cheese really stands for this, although he says that their government, if they win, he and Grace Poe will have compassion for the
Compassion,
poor.
yeah.
No? So, but really, since we don't vote based on platforms, and since
No,
it's,
we don't.
we're into a multi-party system, which is bizarre because Bongbong is a nationalista party who's running with Miriam, who belongs to People's Reform Party. Alan's nationalista party, who's running with Duterte, who belongs to PDP Laban. So it's bizarre.
crazy.
So it's really, we're looking at people
That's
and what
true.
they mean to us.
personal?
That's
Yeah,
true.
personal.
That's true. At that point in time that they are running.
Yes.
You know, because in many ways, like, going back to Escudero, I actually get confused with the message that he is sending, or he has been sending all these years, right?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, under Gloria Arroyo, he was the staunch critique, right? Of course, he's got that gravitas. But at the same time, he has supported the RH law, he wants to tighten the CCT, he has supported K-12, and so on and so forth. So now he's sending this message that he's all about government with compassion. Precisely because I think that's what people are looking for, and that matters.
Can I ask you about revisionist history?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you brought this up at the very beginning. How is it that that we can't decide on what the history was, and how is this impacting the way the candidates are doing?
People didn't write enough books.
People didn't write enough books. That's why you guys have to
Sometimes
write
it's
more
as
books.
simple as that.
Or people have not been reading books.
People have not been reading books. I mean,
right?
there are college students in my university that don't know much about martial law, and all they really know, they watched from the documentary Batas Militar. That's
Wow.
it. That's it. So
Is that an indictment
that
of our
is-
educational system, though? Isn't this part of history? What people?
It is certainly an indictment of the educational system. It is also an indictment of the people who are supposed to be writing the books. The people who are supposed to be doing the research and documenting the history. That is why it is important. That's why history as an area of study is important, because it takes a certain kind of skill. Not just anybody can start writing a history book. That you have to learn how to write it, you have to learn how to weigh your sources, you have to learn how to do the complete research, and then write it in a compelling manner. If there was a book and we required it in high school, people would read it, even if they didn't want to. They still would, right? The same way everybody here has read Noli Me Tangere and El Fili, even if voluntarily we never would. This is supposed to be part of our curriculum, and it is, but there's just not enough material out there.
What's interesting is that the Marcoses have published books.
True.
And they're available, I am told, in community libraries in various parts of the country. This has been produced by the Marcos family years ago. So maybe these are what have been read by many of the adults now.
I've got another hypothesis also. I mean, alongside his the historical weakness, so to speak, memory, the creation of memory. I agree, right? If you think about how Holocaust is well ingrained among Germans' youth, right? It's a crime to even reimagine what happened in the 1930s and 1940s. In the Philippines, it seems to be a fair game also for everyone. And to me, it's a crime. However, I would also say that it has to do with the role young people have been given post-1986 in political affairs. Of course, you have got Sangguniang Kabataan, you've got the National Youth Commission, and to a certain extent, they're doing a good job. But at the same time, we must ask ourselves, have we allowed young people to participate fully? In Ateneo, our student council, for example, to begin with, nobody votes already for the student council. And now, nobody's running for the student council. Right? Much
They
worse.
have abandoned it.
Abandoned it. And
The
now
notion
I'm-
of government.
That's right. I mean, not too long ago, I was a student leader, but this is just about less than 15 years ago when the student council was still okay. Not that it was already, it was very good, but it was okay. Now, you see that, and it's not just Ateneo, many other universities are encountering the same thing. This is not isolated to the Philippines.
Yeah.
The literature shows that the young participation of young people around the world is declining.
Yes.
One possible explanation is neoliberalism, right? People would rather be working, people would rather pursue social mobility. And in the Philippines, our education system, apart from the weakness of our history classes, has also been geared towards training a labor force that would work abroad. It's not a generation of young people who think critically. That's not the expectation. The expectation is that they would become, that's why we have got K-12, right? The expectation is that they would become efficient, effective laborers for export when they graduate from college.
So that there two points. I think first is the current media landscape now puts much more power in the hands of citizens than before. So
Yes.
it is easy
Actually, I
to
was gonna
revise,
bring it there.
right? So
Yes,
it is easy
exactly.
to
That's a good
revise
point,
any
yeah.
history as long as you have a Facebook page and
Right.
a popular blog.
Yeah.
And then secondly, some of the things that they've been seeing now is we think that there's a decline. Many people were worried that there is this sharp decline in political participation. But the question is, maybe we should be changing our definition of political
Ah, sure.
participation. Because the traditional way we define
Sure.
political participation is attending rallies, writing letters to your congressman, doing this and this and that. It didn't include liking comments, leaving comments on the Raptor
Right,
page
right,
or
right.
something like this.
Sure.
So right now, the fields of study are revising the way they measure engagement and
Fair enough.
participation. But on the other hand, also, this new generation considers politics very differently. They engage with government very differently, and how they
Yeah.
consider the role of government is not the same as generations before, right? The issue of training a labor force, I think, is more an economic problem, because the poor have no choice; they have
Fair
to make
enough.
money,
Yeah, fair enough.
right? Even if you say that K to 12 is, even if we say K to 12 is really geared towards training people for jobs, the reality of it is they do need jobs.
yes,
I
sure.
mean, we're talking
Sure.
about food on the table, we're talking about education for the future,
Sure.
we're talking about stability and healthcare. But the policy for
Sure.
targeting the export labor market is something that is changeable. and was something that was very specifically pursued during the Arroyo years. And now we're seeing with some of our studies that while jobs definitely is one of the most important concerns for voters now, they want jobs here. Right? And that's why personally, I'm very confused why jobs has not been bigger on the campaign agenda of people.
That's true.
Like, why are we not talking about jobs? Because we talk about the economy a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think people understand completely how tied the economy is to jobs. Because the economic language is about inflation,
True.
Yes.
foreign direct
Yes.
investments,
True.
expanding all of these things. When in reality, for voters,
Yeah.
they're talking about jobs.
Is
Yes.
it because
Income.
unemployment is less than 10%? About 7%? So it's
But we have the highest
under
unemployment
Yes,
in
under-
Southeast
underemployment,
Asia.
Yes.
The highest
Southeast Asia,
underemployment.
6.6%.
That's right, yeah.
Yes.
And underemployment is the problem.
Underemployment is
20,
the problem because
yeah.
the poor cannot afford to be unemployed.
Totoo.
So the definition of unemployment in the Philippines in the official statistics is something like if you worked 1 hour a week, you're officially employed. So it's very,
Yeah,
but that's an
good point.
international definition that we really have to
Yeah.
adhere to. At the same time, it doesn't really reflect what we need it to reflect, which is to what degree is employment supposed to measure the quality of
Quality,
life
yeah.
of people.
But notice that all the candidates, presidential candidates, VP, I think the VP candidates are all talking about an anti-poverty program called CCT.
Yes.
And they're all saying they'll add something to it.
Right.
It's no longer a differentiator for the administration.
Yes.
Because Binay wants to add something more.
Like 5 Ps, diba?
5 Ps.
Yeah.
What's the last P? Anyway, Grace Po wants to add food.
Yes.
So because there is a big market for this kind of talk about
Yeah.
CCTs. So for me, I find that very interesting, and that even Escudero and the rest have weighed in on the issue.
And because there are something like 4.5 million families
Yes.
enrolled in CCT,
Totoo.
if they say they're going to discontinue it, that's a lot of
Yes.
votes.
That's right.
That's families.
So the administration seems to count on those votes, or at least part of the calculus. Do you think that's a correct? I mean, will you see those votes for the vice president? Do you see them going to Leni Robredo? Look at both of you.
Yeah.
They all like, no.
It's very hard to say because we've really voted based on personality.
Personality.
Never on platform.
It's very difficult really to say that we vote on based on platform.
That's true.
Here's what, well, you know what I think about talking about it as personalities. But what I think about the CCT, unfortunately, the ethical behavior that was, the CCT was really not politicized. It was a very conscious effort to not politicize the 4 Ps program, that it is not an Aquino administration program. It is a social welfare program.
Yes.
Stated.
It was, yes,
Right.
right?
Is that the reality?
And so now, well, that's the reality.
It
Because
was
now,
started by Gloria Arroyo.
it was started by Gloria.
Right.
The spirit of it is it should cross administration.
Okay.
It's the government's
Yeah.
program. So they can't rely on those votes because it was never packaged as a Daang Mituwid program,
Yes.
right? So
Now it is being packaged as such.
now.
Now.
But if the way patronage politics is done
Yeah.
locally is you start packaging it in the beginning, which is the right way of doing it is not packaging it that way. So they did the right thing.
They did the right
They
thing.
did the right thing, but they can't count on those votes. That's the consequence.
Wait, can I ask you
Ganda.
about the role? You talked about this a little bit, that the participation is different in this day and age. Specifically, I want to ask you about social media. These are the first elections. No one seems to know what to do with social media or how large or how little a role social media will play. What is your sense of this?
My sense is social media plays a large role mostly because it's such a close race for the top spots, right? If this was a race where there are 10 points from each other, social media wouldn't play that big a role.
Yeah.
Because we have this silo effect where
Sure.
we're reading things on our feed that agree with us already, and then we have maybe 35 to 40% on the internet, maybe 95% of them on Facebook,
Yes.
some of them not regularly. So as a percentage, it's not that huge.
Sure.
But if we're talking about a vice presidential race that's in a dead heat with the third person at 3 points behind, that is going to make a large difference. In the same way the OFW vote now, which is worth more than 1 million voters, if it wasn't a close race, wouldn't be important. But now it's very important.
I think social media serves as a trigger for discussion,
Yeah.
which the issues are picked up by the so-called mainstream media.
Yeah.
But notice that the politicians place their ads on TV, not on social media. There are some on social.
You know where they place it? On Facebook and YouTube. And then
Facebook
they
and YouTube.
actually wind up taking the news reports and pushing that out as ads. It's very, very interesting to watch behavior right now. But go ahead, go ahead.
No, I was just.
But the lion's share is on television. That's
That's
correct.
right, because when we interview the people behind the campaigns, they say that they need to put their ads on TV. I said, why not social media? Because they said that TV is still king when
That's
it comes
right.
to
Yes.
voters' basis
That's
for
right.
decision making.
And
That's
yet,
right.
one of the campaign managers actually just said that they don't know what works right now because TV's not working. Right?
Oh,
So-
seriously?
Yeah, this was 2 days ago because I was like, so how? I was asking them how they saw it. So it's so tight now. I guess. So
Yeah.
what else do you see, Marites?
Well, it begins in social media,
Yeah,
and then it's picked up. So it's a very it's a catalyst, it's a trigger, it's a starter. So everything seems to be taking off from social media. But as to how this will impact on voters, I don't
Yeah.
know. It still remains to be
Yeah.
seen.
No, does it matter that the internet penetration rate is just 40%? Does it matter?
you know, I would also say
This-
it's a
yeah.
little bit more than that because you have
Oh, is
things
it?
like
Okay.
free Facebook.
Ah, of
That's
course.
the number,
Right.
right?
Of course,
Internet,
of course. Yes, yes.
the
Of course.
internet penetration rate is 40%,
Yes.
Yeah.
but
Internet
uh,
access, I think.
Internet
internet
access,
access. Mobile phones
Yes.
now can access free Facebook.
That's right.
Right.
So that comes in through
Yes.
internet.org, which brings it up much more. And we can see the
yes.
difference in engagement because the guys coming in on free Facebook ask you to put the entire article there
Yes.
on Facebook. So they don't have to
Yeah,
pay
that's right.
for it. Right?
That's
So
right.
I don't know.
Yes.
What,
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think even the people behind the campaigns are all assessing. They really
Yes.
don't know whether social media will play a large role this campaign.
It's the great free marketplace of ideas.
Sure.
You know, you have videos that are homemade that become viral that can change.
right.
You have videos of candidates that are taken on with a smartphone and put on Facebook and can change anybody's vote.
Sure. May I share something from our research?
yeah, please, we'd love.
So I'm not promoting our research, but
No,
it's,
I
it's
like
my-
it. All
should,
research,
yes.
please. That means you studied it.
Yes, yes.
No, it's just interesting that yes, we're talking about the internet, but the top 3 sources of reliable information for this is around the country, but this survey was done towards the end of last year.
Yeah.
Are still television news, radio news, and TV interviews, and. In Tacloban, where I am doing the ethnographic research with my RA, it's really the radio. Because TV, not everybody has TV, right? But
Yeah.
but if you so this is an affected community by Typhoon Yolanda.
Yes.
So radio is what they have.
Yes.
So more likely than they do television. And so whatever they hear from radio, and normally these are local radio stations, shapes their opinions. Of course, we've got informants who have their own internet cafes who could pay for, the yung piso internet cafes for every 5 minutes. And we've got young people accessing information from the internet like that. But many of our other informants would be hard pressed to log on the internet and go on Facebook and click look for this particular candidate, whereas you just turn on the radio and it's there. Realpolitik, I suppose, is what happens on radio.
Interesting, Clarissa, do you see the balance? Is there a shift already? Is it still primarily radio? So this is from Tacloban, that's the research.
Radio is tricky because radio is local. So from
True.
from the
point.
perspective of running a campaign, it's very inefficient to go through radio, because then you have to have your candidate go to each of these radio stations. And then in any local radio market, there's several players, and they're
Right.
competing with a larger radio station that's in the big city. So when you pick radio stations to guest interview on, it's not clear what your exposure is going to be. You don't get repeated the way you get repeated on television. So on television, if you give an interview in the cable news show, you will end up repeated in the 6 p.m. prime time
Yeah,
broadcast,
that's
and you get slices of your interview done here and there, and then it's across the country. So there's a scale
Okay.
concern when you
Okay.
are planning the campaign, and that is the limitation of radio: is how do you achieve
Scale it.
scale, right? And on the internet, it is easier to achieve scale in the style of radio, because
Oh,
it's so cheap to do a YouTube
yeah.
video. It's so cheap to get interviewed by anybody, right? And then, but then the strategy becomes, how do you get it out there to get as many eyeballs in the internet, version of it as possible.
I want to toss this to you. This is from Carlo Ople. Hello, Carlo.
Oh, hello,
There,
Carlo.
And he is the managing director of Dentsu Digit. And he actually says that he's watching us now, but the money is being spent on social media, he says. But he'd say 70% is on black ops.
The trolls.
Do you see
Yes.
this?
The trolls.
70% of
70%.
social
Carlo, I'm
media-
quoting you. Yeah,
of social
send
media
me the
spending.
stats. Social media spending. He says he'd
Yes.
say 70% on black ops.
Yes.
We see a lot of it, and we've seen, for example, cyberbullying that's happened because of that. That's triggered. We see something very methodical in the way it
Yes.
works.
Yes.
What's your reaction to this, and what's its impact?
It's hard to fathom 70% of how money spent
Methodological
on
difficulty, yeah.
social media. But anyway,
Of what's being spent on the
on-
internet,
goes
I think
to-
goes to social media for black ops. He said 70% is on black ops.
we need to get your data.
Yeah.
But I was thinking of what you said about radio. I think radio's targeted really, as you said, for very specific areas. Because I remember the campaign of Jojo Binay when he was running for vice president. He was he targeted areas where radio was king, and he would use radio.
Right.
I think it's just the way Sergio Osmeña also does his campaign.
Right.
They go to areas where maybe TV is king, and then radio is king, then they use whatever medium is dominant in that area.
Right. Sure. Sure. May I respond to Carlos'
Yeah,
question?
please.
I'll be a bit appreciative of these trolls, to be honest,
How come?
because research shows that saboteurs,
The dissenter.
the dissenters, define people's opinions very well.
Oh, how interesting.
Right?
Yeah, they're forced to take a position.
Exactly, right? Even in the sociology of generations, right? Well, young people become more clearly defined if they've got a big enemy out there.
But if
Right?
the trolls were intelligent
Oh, well,
and convincing,
oh,
but the trolls that we see,
but we can see the trend, right? We have it here.
Yeah,
People's dispositions are changing every time there's a survey that is run.
It's much more volatile
right?
than before.
Exactly, exactly.
We
So
haven't-
yeah, this is not like the U.S. or maybe England, which has countries which have clearly defined political parties, and it's either you're a Democrat or a Labor or whatever, right? In the Philippines, you're beholden to personalities and the messages that they send.
So, just on the black ops,
Go.
assuming I understand the question correctly, which is
Yeah.
70% of the
money
spending on social media specifically is for black ops.
Actually, it's unclear.
It's
And
unclear.
Carlo,
Yeah.
send me a message back. He said
Yes.
money is being spent on social media, but I'd say 70% is on black ops.
So my understanding of that is, of the slice that goes to social media, 70%
70%
of
is
that
black
goes to
ops.
black ops.
That could be true.
That
Yeah.
sounds believable. And
Yes.
I
Yes.
would believe it, especially because black ops needs to be very safe from, it needs to be separate from the actual candidate.
Correct.
And that's very hard to do on television. It's hard to do on other media. It's easier to do on Facebook. And when you have any budget spent for black ops,
Sure.
it sounds very sinister. It's really negative campaigning, right?
Yes.
When
Yeah.
you have budget for negative campaigning, it's easier to spend it on social media because it's easier to hide who is funding it.
yeah.
Correct.
So as a strategy, you probably won't have television spending that's negative campaigns because
Yes, that
you
doesn't
don't want
work.
it to connect
It's
with
so- yeah.
your candidate.
He responded. Thank you, Carlo. He said,
Thank you,
take a
Carlo.
look at all the boosted posts.
Yes.
That's
so
right,
in
yeah,
social
News
media,
articles attacking candidates.
Sure.
Rarely genuine promotional content. And Carlo would know because he runs an agency.
That's
Do
true.
you
Yes.
do Carlo, you have stats you want to give us.
Yes.
That would be really interesting for study,
Absolutely.
for posterity.
For posterity.
So you think that is believable? unbelievable. I mean, it
Yes,
is.
I think so.
Yeah, and affecting the debate. We have
Affecting the
roughly 15 minutes left, and I want to go to our reporters. Guys, are you awake? I'm going to give you a mic. I want to go to our reporters. Which one do I? So part of it is because these guys have been following the vice presidential candidates
I like the discussion.
since the beginning of the campaign. And I'm going to turn to Pia Ranada, who's been with the camp of the Duterte, so she knows Alan Peter Cayetano. Tell us, how ready is Alan? What do you expect? What kind of campaign has he run?
Well, being a senator, I'm sure Alan knows the oratorical contest that will happen today, and he's pretty much briefed on the topics. His brother told me that he just prepared that he would prepare for any Senate hearing. So he was briefed by his staff, and then he read up on statistics. So I think Cayetano will do well because he's very used to flinging statistics around. In his speeches, he's the more cerebral between him and Duterte. So he's the one who talks about platform more, about how things will be done. So in terms of content, I think he will have something to say.
So why do you think he hasn't done as well as Bongbong Marcos why do you think he hasn't done as well as Bongbong Marcos and Cheese Escudero?
Well, one reason could be he's not as well known. His name is not as well known, especially in other parts of the Philippines. So he's known in NCR in Metro Manila. But if you go to Mindanao, if you go to Visayas, especially before the election season, he's not that famous a last name.
Got it.
And also, his running mate is one reason because Duterte tends to steal the thunder from anyone.
Yes.
So if you're in the same room as Duterte and you're trying to get attention, a lot of people are in those events just for Duterte and would rather hear Duterte for an hour than listen to anyone speak for 5 minutes who they don't know. So a lot of the times, Cayetano is sort of a sidekick, like to the side a bit, and then Duterte sort of is the man of the hour, and people don't really aren't really there for Cayetano. But if you saw the survey numbers, Cayetano is now first place in Mindanao according to the Lilo poll. So I think it's also Duterte's influence. So in that sense, it's also a blessing to be Duterte's running mate because, of course, being his bailiwick, Mindanao will follow whoever his running mate is. So it's both a good thing and a bad thing.
There's gossip and speculation that Duterte is also swinging Bongbong Marcos. Did you see that in the campaign trail at all?
Well, when he visited Lawag,
Yeah.
we saw him socializing with Amy Marcos. He visited the grave of the mausoleum of Marcos, and we saw a lot of supporters who are Duterte Bongbong. They really rallied when he was there, and Cayetano was not in Lawag. So even if Duterte hasn't really said anything, announced any support for Bongbong, like officially,
Yeah.
his supporters are very loudly for Bongbong. Many of his supporters are loudly for Bongbong, even the ones in Mindanao, because we have a lot of Ilocano migrants in Mindanao, so they support Bongbong. So I was in Davao yesterday, and I could see Duterte Bongbong posters in many areas, even if there were also many Duterte Cayetano posters.
Interesting. We will go back with that. All right, then segue to natin. Patty Pachon has been following. Look, I like this because we can wheel. Patty has been following Bongbong Marcos. Patty, what has it been like following this man, and what do you expect today?
Well, following this man, kasi I graduated from UP, so I have a lot of insights about martial law, and it fascinates me how the people are very fanatic about him. When I ask them, why are you supporting Senator Marcos? They would say that because of his father, we miss the days when during the administration there were jobs, the economy was good, the prices were low.
Similar to what-
Actually, it's very, for me, when I see Senator Marcos, he's trying to keep himself away from the image of his father. He rarely speaks of his father and his family in sorties. More of he's trying to establish that his own accomplishments, like being the chairperson of the Senate Committee on Local Government. But the people, they keep reverting back that this is the son of President Ferdinand Marcos, and we want that administration back, so we're voting for him.
Interesting. That's actually what you said, Jail.
Exactly.
So she's seeing it on the ground.
Exactly.
What do you expect from Bongbong Marcos in this
Well,
debate?
I'm expecting that Senator Marcos has been good in debates and in speaking in the public. Like for example,
He's
in the Go
articulate.
in the Go Negosyo Forum, he knows his statistics, he knows the data, but I guess what's lacking is his action plan because he just keeps on saying that we need this, we need that, but there has really been no specific action plan how he's going to go about his plan. So maybe we can take note of that. And also, I've heard a tip from the camp that because Senator Marcos has been very safe in his answers, like when he's asked about the martial law and President Aquino's criticisms of him, he's very safe in his answers. But now I think they're switching or shifting to show a more combative side of Senator Marcos.
Interesting. Great. Patty Pasion's tip for Bongbong Marcos. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to go back to you. Swapped chairs. Let's go. Camille Elamia has been following the campaign of Grace Poe and Cheese Escudero. Tell us about Cheese. I mean, you've seen from when he's so high down to where he's dropped, but still at high. What do you expect? What has he been like on the campaign trail?
Covering Cheese Escudero is like covering Grace Poe because one, they usually campaign together more often than not, and they have the same platform, and usually they really have the same stand on all the issues.
The same?
And well, we cannot deny it. They sound the same. They sound similar. And also, if Grace Poe has FPJ, Cheese has Heart Evangelista, and he never fails to mention Heart or even allude to her in his speeches, and the public likes that. They usually scream upon hearing the name of Heart. And as for the statistics now, that they're statistically tied, Bongbong Marcos and Cheese Escudero, we tried to ask him several times about it. Of course, he wouldn't say that he's threatened, but we can see that there's a change in the strategy of Cheese and the tandem because now they campaign separately. Like he focuses on the areas which he has to improve on, and Grace does the same thing. And he admitted that they had a change in strategy a month after the start of the campaign because of the feedback from the ground and also with the numbers. And he keeps on saying that for him to be statistically tied or close to Bongbong, who is the son of the late President Bongbong Marcos, and Ferdinand Marcos was the boss of
Yes.
his dad. So for him to be tied,
Personal tie.
yeah, to be tied with Bongbong Marcos, for him it's already a big deal because it's the boss of his father, the son of the boss of his father.
The son of the boss of his father.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you expect to see from Cheese today?
Cheese has always been prepared in speaking in public, and he's used to debates in the Senate. I covered him when it was the RH bill, the syntax, and he's used to doing that. And it's quite interesting to see how the 4 or 5 senators will be on the floor today because they also exchange they also do exchanges on the Senate floor. But this time, it's as vice presidential candidates, so it's interesting to see how they will do. And we asked Cheese Escudero how he prepared for this debate, and he said he just read up on the latest and he talked to experts to brief him about the latest in economics and in economy and also in poverty, things like that. So the topics that will be discussed later. So that's it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Camille. We're going to go back to you. Okay, so you're trying to figure out what happened to Lenny Robredo and everyone else. For that, we're going to go to Rappler's managing editor this way, Glenda Gloria. Glenda, tell us
Maria.
about...
Yeah, I'm not covering Lenny. But unfortunately, our reporter who's covering her, Bea Cupin, is in this post right now. Well, I guess for one, she's the only woman who's running for vice president. She's the only non-senator in the race. And she has a good narrative, her life story, and both also her short political career. So I guess in that sense, she's a fascination, and she stands out in terms of those unique elements in the campaign. And just recently, if you review the campaign sortie, she's the only one who has braved the lion's den, so to speak, Ilocos Norte. She did spend a couple of days there campaigning right in Marcos country. So that's how she has braved it. She has taken a different stand from Mar Rojas, for example, in the case of the Kidapawan farmers.
Right.
And it's not messaging on her part because she was a lawyer for farmers groups when she was a farmers lawyers before. So it's not as if this was just messaging or branding on her part.
Is her performance a surprise to you?
No, I think largely because she's different in that field of vice presidential candidates, and I guess Filipino voters would, loved her story. She was widowed. She lost her husband. She was forced to join politics. Filipinos love that kind of narrative.
And
A reluctant candidate from day one.
And then Trillanes and Gringo Onasan. What do you expect from them?
Well, it's fascinating to see them on the same stage. We have to recall that Trillanes looked up to Gringo for many years. He looked up to him as his mentor. They're both former coup plotters.
Yes.
Trillanes was just a very young man when Gringo staged coups against not just Cory but also against. And then, of course, Honasan was partly forced to go underground under the Arroyo administration on suspicion that he was the one who bankrolled and supported the Oakwood Mutiny,
in
which
2003.
Trillanes led. And now they're
Yeah.
running against each other. I don't know if they are truly running against each other, but that's another matter altogether. So, yeah, those are two former soldiers, but I'm not surprised that they're not really performing well in the surveys because they've not been active, and it remains a mystery why Trillanes ran for VP.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're on the same feed. You're going to get the debate, which should start in a short while. Let's just quickly go, just a quick summary from each of you guys right before we go on. Let's start. Jail, go ahead. The summary right before we go to the... you want to... You look surprised. You look surprised. Why don't I toss to the journalist, Teresa, and then Kayo? Go. Yeah, just in terms of what you expect now. We're going into the debate.
Okay. I'm not taking Trillanes and Honasan seriously. First, Trillanes has no presidential candidate. He's running solo, an orphan VP. And what bothers me is that they can go back to the Senate if they lose.
Yeah.
Gringo was a last-minute choice because there was no other choice for Binay. So these two, I'm really not taking them very seriously. So the three, I think, the three other candidates, we have, I really want to watch Escudero, Marcos, Robredo, and Cayetano, the four,
Okay.
and how they'll perform.
Clarissa.
I'm excited because the first presidential debate was a game changer in a sense that it made the debate an event.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we could see from the polls the debate can swing these numbers,
right, yeah.
4 or 5%, either way, up or down. And given that it's a dead heat across 2 or 3 candidates, this debate can be the catalyst for
Fantastic.
where the rest of the vice presidential race is going to go.
That's right. In fact,
Jayo?
I do agree with Claire. Looking at the trends, right, we have seen that there are top 2 candidates. But the truth is, if we factor in margin of error, most likely the differences are not really statistically significant.
So Lenny is in the running as
I
well.
think so.
Okay.
I think so. And I'm also looking at the other surveys that have been done just recently, and then what we call statistical tie, right? This is
Right.
present among more or less the 3 of them. So therefore, it is very important for these candidates, if they're listening to us right now, it's very important for them to really be very clear with what they want to achieve.
Wonderful. Okay, we're going to be switching to CNN Philippines and their coverage, the vice presidential debate. Stay on this feed. We're switching now.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.